Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to dive into the Civivi Knives Hyperpulse. Could the Hyperpulse be a Civivi cubic killer? We're going to find out. It's definitely a bigger knife than the cubic, coming in at 7.98 inches with a 3.5 inch drop point blade of 14C 2010 steel. You have a nice and needle-like precision tip there, great for piercing of course, and doing those fine intricate detail cuts. You got a nice, I think, attractive top swedge up there. It's a flat ground top swedge, so it gives it a nice contrast to the bottom here. You do have a small row of jumps there. It does function okay. Fine cut jimping would have definitely been better, but this one does grip the thumb. You do have a sharpening choil. However, it comes to about right where my fingernail is, so you should have 3-4 sharpenings. I did sharpen this one up after I finished the testing, and it sharpened up very, very nicely and took a screaming sharp edge. Unlike the cubic, this one comes with a decent height, deep hollow grind that comes down nice and thin to around 16 thousandths behind the edge with a 24 degrees per side edge bevel. Let's see how it cuts. Well, I figured this one would be pretty darn slicey. Especially with Civivi's geometry whenever they grind their knives. This one has a nice deep hollow grind, and boy is it slicing well. Came with a pretty good edge. It feels pretty sharp. It's kind of hard to tell right now. That doesn't really peek its head out till I get to the sisal rope, unless it's completely dull. But this one, gliding through this no problem. You know, a hollow grind, especially a thin hollow grind like this, is going to perform great. Just about 90% of the thing most people cut. Just when you have really dense things that it could cause some drag. Now testing those ergos, and I was a little worried because it's a thinner handle, but I'm pretty locked in, and I'm surprisingly able to get a good bit of force into the wood. I could feel the clip, but I wouldn't call it a hot spot at all, especially the way I'm holding it in the hammer grip. And like I said, I was getting a lot of force into it. Now into the 1/2 inch sisal rope, this is where I can feel the crisp edge. It's slicing very well. And you can see I'll swap up to the pointer grip often. That's because it's sharp enough to do so. I didn't check yet, but I can bet that this one has, you know, a 24 degree. They usually put 24 degrees per side edges on their knives. And it's usually evident whenever I'm cutting the sisal rope, anything over, say, like 21, 22 degrees, it's a noticeable difference. I mean, I've been doing this long enough, cutting enough stuff, that I really feel that resistance from a thinner edge bevel. I mean, you can have a thick behind the edge knife, but if you put a thin enough edge bevel on it, it's going to perform like a slicing knife. I mean, of course, it depends on how thick behind the edge, but yeah, this one has good geometry, and this isn't thick enough rope to start to get bind up on the flat at all. So of course, the hollow grind is really going to excel. You got enough belly on this knife to easily make these cuts on a flat cutting surface. You know, it's going to be a pretty versatile blade shape. Your pivot, your point is about in line with the pivot, so we should be able to do drag cuts. We'll find that out in just a second. There you go. And I'm just showing you can use both. You know, a lot of times, unless I need that tip to do a very intricate cut, I tend to use the belly. It's just less thought into it. You know, when I'm trying to make a quick cut, I'm not sitting there thinking what portion of the edge I'm going to use. Whatever works best, that's what I use. And so far, nothing had caused any problems, no drag whatsoever. And yeah, it is making short work of this 12-ounce denim. Absolutely phenomenal. Love their hollow grinds. Excellent job, Civivi. Now let's move on to the deployment and action of this knife. So you have a flipper tab and you have thumb studs. This has such an incredible break to it. Just watch this thumb stud action. I mean, rockets out. Once you release that button, it's a free dropper. Flipper tab, outstanding. Very crisp break, like right on that borderline. If it was any stronger, I would say it's a little too strong, but the way it's sitting, Very, very nicely done. I do have a little bit of an audible stick to that button, but nothing that bothers me. I don't mind that. It lets me know that the knife is fully locked up and engaged. But listen. So I don't know if you heard it, but it does have some stick. Nothing that's uncomfortable in the least and doesn't bother me in the least. It's riding on cage ceramic bearings and it's giving you that nice fluid, nice snappy action. Now let's touch on the ergos. After we finish that testing, I thought for the most part it was comfortable. I could feel the pocket clip when I'm really, really bearing down, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I wouldn't call it a hot spot per se, but I could definitely notice it was there. You have a longer, more generous handle than the Civivi Cubit, but when it comes to ergos, I would say they're pretty similar. This one has a chamfer and this one has a nice softened edge to it, so the corners of this feel nicer, at least in my hands. This one has a little bit more of a narrow handle, and I didn't personally notice any, hot spots. No matter which grip I held it in, I thought it was pretty comfortable. Even this draw grip, I'm able to get enough behind that flipper tab to where it wasn't uncomfortable for me. Now let's close it up and take a look at these handles. So this one is also in aluminum without any liners, just like the Cubit. This one has all these lightning holes on it, kind of like a crosshair hatching on the outside of that. Then your smaller holes have a nice satin finish on that chamfer. Looks nice, and then you have a recessed spot and some texture on that button lock. Nice finishing on the aluminum. It holds up pretty well, and I didn't find it to be slick at all in the hand. You have countersunk screws, nice crisp T8 hardware, T8 pivot that is also countersunk, and then you have the dome pivot side right here, T8 as well. Your only T6 is your pocket clip screws. They did not inset the clip into the aluminum. However, they did countersink those pan head screws, so they're flush, and it is somewhat rounded on the front part of that pocket clip. I was a little worried that this hole right there would cause some bunching, but being that your contact point is behind that, I didn't really have any problems. I mean, your mileage may vary, but not mine. No visible lanyard hole on this side, but you do have a hidden lanyard post right here. 2 hourglass standoffs and completely open back. So if you need to blow this out with some compressed air, get some gunk out of there, you can easily do that. Even use a Q-tip to clean out inside there. But being that you have no liners and you have all this skeletonizing from these holes on the outside, this thing, in my opinion, is a featherweight at 3 ounces. That's a 3.5-inch blade, so that's well under the ounce and inch that some people care about. Not so much me, but I'm just going to say this one's nice and lightweight, just like the Civivi Cubit is. I don't know if I mentioned it, but that deep carry pocket clip is reversible. And I guess it's a deep carry clip, but I don't find it to really be sitting that deep carry because you have this portion sticking up out of the pocket. Now, it went in and out of my pocket nicely, but you do have a flipper tab. If you do put something else in there, it's going to be hitting that. Like I said earlier, you have a recess spot for your button lock and some texture on top of the button so you don't accidentally disengage it and you don't slip off of it. Nice positive lockup. Yeah, I haven't had a Civivi fail on me, especially after finishing the testing. Now for some size comparisons, it's in the middle of the anterior wrap 1 and 2, and it's just a hair longer than the Civivi Vision FG, and it's a good bit bigger than the Civivi Cubit. And it's pretty much identical in length as the Civivi Button Lock Elementum and the Civivi Voltaic. All right, now for my nitpicks and complaints, I wish they would have given us either a better sharpening tool or brought that plunge grind all the way back so you'd have all that sharpening life, but as it sits, you have about to where my fingernail is. I can open that up myself if I want to, but it'd just be nice to be done from factory. Let me make sure. Oof. If you are going to open that up, you got to be, I don't even know if you could. Yeah, the way they got this stop pin right there, I don't think you could open that up yourself. Let me see where it's hitting. Yeah, it is hitting like literally right behind that edge. So you just have to let that flare on you. Also, the edge bevel on this one came in at 24 degrees per side. It's kind of defeating the purpose of this nice thin hollow grind and then putting a 24 degrees per side edge bevel. I'll say this, after testing, I tested the Civivi Placoid alongside the Hyperpulse. And the Hyperpulse has a thinner grind as far as that hollow. But this flat grind, being close to the hollow grind, performed a good bit better because this one had a 20 degrees per side edge bevel. I wish they would at least give us 20 degrees per side. It's plenty strong enough. And I will say, any of these, like these Civivis with these nice hollow grinds on them, a 17 degrees per side edge bevel on 14C is a game changer. It performs worlds different. It's such a more slicier knife than a 24 degrees per side edge bevel. Just my experience from the testing I do. And not something that bothers me, but I know some people, are turned off completely by it, but a little bit of button stick, I don't find it to be, to where it's hurting me or hurting my thumb or anything to disengage, but it's definitely there. So, would I consider the Civivi Hyperpulse a cubic killer? No, not at all. They're different enough. You have a larger knife in the Hyperpulse. You have a full flat grind. You have a hollow grind here. I'll say that the cubit is a little bit more comfortable for me, especially the softening they have here. But I will say that the Hyperpulse is still comfortable. You have more handle, but it's just a more narrow handle. So they're pretty similar. The cubit has a better sharpening choil, so you're going to have tons of sharpening life, and it'll be a lot easier to fix the cubit because that stop pin sits a lot more in front of it. The action's very, very comparable. The Hyperpulse may have a little bit more crisper break to it, but not by much. Both great EDC carry options, but if you're looking for a bigger version, then, the Hyperpulse is definitely a great option. I'll always love the cubit, and it'll probably remain one of my top 5 for the foreseeable future. But when it comes to the Hyperpulse, you got a nice full-size EDC knife that's very lightweight in the pocket, carries nicely, it's comfortable, and has a remarkable action no matter which deployment method you choose to use. I think it's a rather attractive looking knife. I love that blade shape. I know some people hate the holes in the scales. I don't love them, but it's definitely not a deal breaker, especially on a budget knife. Now this one comes in at $69.70. So yeah, it is a little bit more premium than, say their G10 knives. You're getting the aluminum and the hard anodized coating on it. And this one has a hollow grind, which costs them a little bit more to do. So all in all, if nothing I talked about was a deal breaker, I can highly recommend the Civivi Knives Hyperpulse. So that's going to do it for today's review. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification for more in-depth knife and gear reviews. Not to mention, I have plenty of premium knives on the channel and more budget friendly than this one, along with a bunch of EDC fixed blades, both premium and budget as well, if you would like to check out some more of my content. Give me your thoughts in the comments below on the new Civivi Knives Hyperpulse. Which one do you like better, the Civivi Cubit or the brand new Hyperpulse? If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave those down below as well, and I'll do my best to get back with you. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, keep your knives sharp. Smile more. Race!